We are on the top of Chaf Dalet Amud Beis, the Mishnah. Marchikin is a ilan min ear eser mechamish ama. This is a new thing. We're going to see the Mishnah on Chaf Hey, which talks about keeping a tree away from a bar. This is talking about keeping a tree away from a city. So the Mishnah says you have to keep it eser mechamish ama. It has to be 25 amma, or bechruv or b'shikma, and by a carob tree and a shikma tree, chamishim am. It has to be 50 amas. As the Gemara is going to explain, the reason for this is that it's supposed to be an open, clear area around the city. It makes it look nicer. So a chruv tree and a shikma tree have very thick branches, so they need to be even further away to keep the nice view around the city. Abishol kol ilan srak chamishim am. Abishol says it's not just a shikma, but any tree that doesn't produce fruit is it's not considered nice. It's like it's a fruit tree has a certain beauty to it, so that can come within 25. And any tree that's not doesn't bear fruit is not as nice. It has to be 50 amas away from the city. But me'ir kadma kaitzitz ve'ein nice and dumb. If the city was first, meaning the city was already there, and then someone planted the tree on his own property, you cut it down, and you don't have to pay the person because he did something illegal. The milim kadam, but if the tree was there first, and then the city grew up next to it, kites it's nice and dumb. You still have to get rid of it because it's harming the rabbin, but you have to compensate the owner of the tree. Suffix kadam is suffix kadam. If it's a suffix of which one was first, kaitzitz, you knock it down, you cut it down, as Gemara is going to say, it's if you're trying to get compensation, it has to come down anyway. When Marav Shach comes down, so now you're trying to get money, you're Maitzim Mechaver. So Gemara, my timer, what's the reason for this? I told you the reason already, but the Gemara is asked what's the reason. Amar Ula Mishum No Yoir. To the beauty of the city, you don't have a tree within 25 amas or 50 amas, depending on what kind of tree. But typically, they don't saw the migrish for migrish sada. So there's a second din, independent of this din of putting a tree. Beauty of the tree, it's nice to have a 25 or that not to have trees within 25 or 50 amas of the city. But there's also a second rule that you have to have 1,000 amas around the city that becomes like a public park that you're allowed to walk into. That's the migrish. And after that, there's 1,000 amas that is intended for the people of the city to have their fields where they can grow things. Zok the Gemara. So that should be. What are you talking about? 25 amas. You have 1,000 amas that you're not supposed to grow anything. So you're not allowed to. We say you're not allowed to make your clear area that's supposed to be like a public park for people to walk, and you're not allowed to make a sod out of it. You're not allowed to grow in there. So Gemara, this is going according to Rabbi Lazar says that in a regular city, there's no such thing. You can grow within the park area, the first 1,000 amas, and you can do the other way around. You can change the area outside of that into a park. There's no problem with that. We want both things. We want to have a park doesn't have things growing in it. We also there were masaka that you should have a place for people to grow outside of it that you're not allowed to make into a park. Yet you need to have places that are available for growth. So you're not supposed to make it into the southern part into a park. So the Relazar says all this is only by stay Levian. This is only by the Ari Miklat, which belonged with it's not just I think Ari Miklat, but the cities that were designated for the Levian. That's where we have these strict rules about having a park area, or the Migrish, and having a sada on the outside of it, because Levium had no other sada, and we also wanted to have these Ari Levium to be beautiful. But Rabbi says, but a regular city, there's no such rules. You could switch it around as the people of the city want. So according to Rabbi Lazar, That's our Mishnah that says you can't have within 25 amas. A tree is going in a regular city, not a Ir Levi. Zok tomorrow. Yeah. The Belaz the Ama Oisin saw the Migish saw the Hakam Shem Noya Leavdin. L'Rabbanan Nami. We can even say that's according to the Rabbanan, who say that even in a regular city, not a Ari Levin, there's a restriction of you can't make the Sada into a Migish and a Migish into a Sada. L'Rabbanan Nami the Ami Ein Oisin saw the Migish Loy Migish Sada Hani Milizroy. That's all Lagabi planting. We say you can't put into the area, the 1,000 amas closest to the city, that's supposed to be a migrash, it's supposed to be a park. That's talking about planting like fields of grain. Avalilanis, but planting a tree, avdina. It's you can't that you're allowed to do because it's supposed to be a park, and trees are nice to have in a park. So within those 1,000 amas, there's no problem to have trees. But over here we're talking about that it's nice for a city to have a empty area right around it to make a nice view. That you can't do. So therefore you're not allowed to put within 25 amas of the city, you can't put a tree. Where do we see such a thing? That we're saying according to Rabbanan, you're not allowed to plant in the Migrish grain, but you could plant trees. The Tanya. We have a brisa that supports that svara. Karfif, the rule is that an area that's enclosed, you're allowed to carry in midaraisa on Shabbos. The chamum u'misakin, that if an area that's more than a base sosayim, that's even though it's closed in, shahukah. So it depends. The chamum u'misakin, you're not allowed to carry in it. But shahukah v'ladira, if it was closed up to be used for a residential use, then you're allowed to carry in it. But only masakin, that enclosed area that's for commercial use or used for your animals, that's not the chacham masakin. If it's more than a base of sayim, it's the asad hoitzah, or the asad being carrying something dalad as. But if it's hokav ladira, then it's mutter. So nizr rubai hareyu kagina v'asa. If most of it was planted with wheat or with vegetables, then it's treated like a garden. It's not considered that it's surrounded to be used for residential purposes, and therefore it's going to be area yoisa besasayim that's not hukaf but rather it's for commercial use. It's being used as a garden. Nita rubai, but if most of it was planted with trees, hareyu kachotzer, then it could still be residential. So we see over here the nafkamina, that something that is planted commercially with grain or with vegetables, that means that it's being used for commercial purposes. It takes away from its residential nature, and therefore it would be usher on Shabbos. But if it has trees, trees can be part of a park. You want to have shade, you want to have places to walk under, so that could still be residential. So the same thing over here. We're saying that the migrush, that park area near the city, you're allowed to put trees in it. But the Rabbanan, that's what our Mishnah is saying, but within 25 amas, because of the noise of the city, you're not supposed to put in trees. Zak the Gemara. If the city came first, then you cut down, and then someone planted a tree next to it within 25 amas, you cut down the tree and you don't have to pay the person. We're going to see in the next plot that if someone plants a tree within 25 amas or 50 amas, depending on the case, of a bar, you cut down the tree and you don't have to pay. And over here we're saying that if the tree was first, if the bar was first, I'm sorry, not over here. With that, when you cut, I'm sorry, by the bar, we said if you put the tree there and it's going to damage someone's bar, you can the owner of the bar can force the tree owner to cut down his tree, but he has to compensate him. But over here, when you're putting a tree next to a city, that you have to, and we force the tree owner to cut it down, we say he doesn't get compensated if the city was there first. Rav Kahana, the reason is because over here we were talking about uh, a city. It's a group. What they say is that we have a similar. So we're saying a pot that has two chefs doesn't get hot and it doesn't get cold. So we have a similar thing that two. What does it say? Too many cooks spoil the soup, right? So things don't get done if there's more than one person. It's more efficient. It's always more efficient when there's someone who's in charge. So the concern is that if we would over here, we were talking about a city, so we would say that he doesn't have to cut it down until somebody pays, until he gets paid. But if it's a city, nobody's going to organize it to make sure he gets paid, and therefore the tree won't get cut down, and it'll be stuck with the ugly tree next to the city. But if it's an individual person by a bar, we don't have to worry about it. The guy will pay him because he wants to get the tree down. Zak Gemara, or my kusha. The Gemara says, why do you have to say such a complicated teretz that we're worried about that nobody will volunteer to pay, and therefore the tree won't get down? Maybe the reason over here why he gets why it's not nice and dumb, is because you're being mazik a whole ramen. So therefore, we take it away, and you don't get paid back. Over there, it's a yachid. So the yachid, he doesn't have to pay him. Eliyit Madir of Kahana Seifit. So this memra this aphorism that we say, Kedera, the Beishutvi Lechamim Karira, that a pot that has more than one chef doesn't get hot and doesn't get cold, it's saying on the Sefer. If we said in the Sefer of our Mishnah, if the tree came first, first you cut it down, and then he gets paid. Why do we say in that case where the tree was there first? Why do we force him to first cut it down and then get paid? Why don't we say the other way around? He should say, "Listen, you want me to cut down my tree? My tree was here first. You first pay me, and then I'll cut it down." And that he said that because if you're going to wait for that, you'll be waiting forever. Because no one's going to be the first guy to send in the contribution. It's only when everyone sees the WhatsApp charity thing, they see how many people donated $180. So he says, "Okay, I'll also do it. Everyone else is doing it. I don't want to look." But nobody wants to be the first one to give the money. That's why we say that first he cuts it down and then he gets paid, because otherwise he'll never get cut down. Zak the Gemara. We said in the Mishnah that if the tree was first, then he gets compensated. He cuts it down, he gets compensated. But if the town was first, then he doesn't get compensated. He has to cut it down, but he doesn't get compensated. But the Mishnah said if it was a suffix which was first, then you cut it down and he doesn't get paid. It's as if it gets the same din as if we know the city was first. In fact, we have the same question. We have a Mishnah that talks about, our Mishnah is talking about, we have a tree next to a city. We have a similar Mishnah that talks about a tree next to a bar, that we say it also damages the bar, and we said it's a suffix. You don't cut it down. Over here, we're saying you cut it down, he doesn't get compensated. So the vaday lav make its cut. Over there by a bar, it depends whether if the tree was first, then it doesn't get cut down at all. If the bar was first, then he has to cut it down, and he doesn't get paid. So it's a suffix at all whether it gets cut down. So the vaday lav make its cut. It's not certain that it's going to get down. If it's a suffix, also we don't tell him to cut it down because I have a tree. You want to cut it down? Bring me a raya that your bar was here first. That I should have to cut it down. But over here, it certainly has to get cut down. The question is whether he's going to get compensated for it. So in either case, he's going to have to cut it down. He has to cut it down misafit. V'mishum dami, and as far as him being compensated on minlay, I see raya v'shkoil. Now the city is the one who is not moitzim mechaver levaraya. He certainly has to cut it down, but now he wants to get compensated. As far as the compensation, the owner of the tree has to bring a raya that his tree was there first in order to take the compensation from the people in the city. Zok the Mishnah. Marchikin is goyrin kavua min ha'ir chamishin amma. If someone has a permanent a kavua dika goyrin, it means a place where they would winnow the grain. Winnowing means throwing it up in the air. If you remember from when you learned Mishnah Shabbos, you throw the grain in the air and the chaff flies away. So you have to keep it 50 amas from the city. And just like we said, Legabi, other damaging things, like a bar, he shouldn't make this within 50 amas. He shouldn't make it within his own property. Unless he has 50 amas in every direction, so the chaff that flies away shouldn't damage his neighbor. And he has to keep it away from the trees from the plants of his friend and from his plowed fields in order that it shouldn't damage it. So the Gemara is going to say what this last line, what is it teaching us? So the Gemara, Maishma ratio, Maishma Seifa. The Gemara at this time understood that the first part of the Mishnah was saying you have to keep it 50 amas away. And this last part saying, is saying a different shear. It's saying a smaller shear. You have to measure and see how far away it goes that it damages. So what's the difference between the ratio and the seifa? The seifa is talking about a smaller, a non-permanent, a temporary pile of grain. So when we winnow it, it doesn't go so far. So then you measure how far it goes. But the ratio was talking about permanent. The permanent one goes 50 ounces. So what does it mean a gairin? As we're understanding the seifa, it's a gairin that's not settled in place. It's not permanent. Anything that you don't winnow with a shovel. When you have a large gairin, you take a shovel and you throw it in the air, and that causes the chaff to fly away. But if you don't use that, if you just use your hands because it's such a small amount, so you just have to measure how far that goes. So that's Abai. Rav Ashi says a different text. Matam Amar. The seifa is not talking about a separate case of a non-kavua gairin. The seifa is just explaining the ratio. It's just giving the reasoning, the first part of the Mishnah. My time marchik and gairin kavua minir chamisha mama. We're just saying the reason is that it shouldn't damage the plants and the what do we say, the plow field. Meisve. We say that you have to separate. There's a brisa that says you have to keep a permanent granary, a permanent pile of grain from the ear chamisha mama. Just like keep it away 50 amas from the city, so too you keep it away from the gourds and the cucumbers, and from the trees, and from the plowed fields. You have to keep it 50 amas from all these things in order that it shouldn't be mazik. So you see, this Bryce is saying that this is the reasoning. It's not giving the separate case of a gairin she'ena kavua. So Bishlam Rav Ashi nicha. This is good according to Rav Ashi that said taka that the seif of our Mishnah is giving the reason. This Bryce says the same thing. Elabaya kasha. So Gemara kasha in a chanami it is a kasha. So Gemara Bishlama Meshkuya Medulia the Azal Avka V'Ase Belibe Umatzvile. So Gemara says, I understand this concept that if you have chaff that's blowing onto your gourds and to your cucumbers, so the chaff goes onto it and it sort of dries it out. It's what is it called? It's a desiccant. It's something that takes away moisture, so it ruins these plants. Elaminiroi. What about from a plowed field? What damage is done to a plowed field by having chaff blowing it? It's because when you have the chaff blowing, the chaff provides nutrients to the field. It's going to be over fertilized and it's going to damage the plowed field. When you're going to then plant on it, it's going to be too much. It's going to grow too. It's not healthy. Dr. Mishnah. Marchikin es hanevelis vesakvaris. You have to keep away dead animals. Vesakvaris and a kever. As a burski and the tannery. Mina'ir from the city chamishim amma. You have to keep it. All these things are going to make a bad smell. So therefore, you have to keep it 50 amas from the city. Ein oisim burski el mizrachayir. You can only make a tannery. Tannery, I guess the tannery is the worst of all these things. You can't make it. The only direction you can make it is 50. Is to the east. Rabbi Kiva doesn't say you can only put it in the east. Rather, he says you can put it to any direction except for the west. And you have to separate it in the west 50 ams. The Gemara is going to explain what this shita was. Marchikin is a mishra minayerik. We had this part of the Mishnah we had referenced earlier. You have to keep a place where you soak flax that again makes a bad smell min hayerik from growing vegetables. There's accretion and the leaks min absalom from the onions. There's a chardel min advarim and the mustard from the bees. Again, so the mishra makes a bad smell. It ruins the urakas, and the leeks get into the onions and they make them not as sharp. It doesn't make it the good onion taste. There's a chardel min advarim. We said Rashi explained earlier because then the bees will eat them hot. They'll have mustard and it will make them hungry. They'll give them a sharp taste in their mouth and they'll go eat up their own honey. Rabbi Yossi mater bechardel, like we said earlier, Rabbi Yossi said the chardel is there. He says chardel is mutter because chardel goes both ways. That just like the chardel damages the honey is also damaging the chardel because they eats up his mustard. So he says it's just like you're saying I have to take away from you have to take away from me. Rabbi Kiva had said that he makes from every direction except for the west. Does he mean to say he's disagreeing with the Tanakama that said all these things have to be 50 amas away? And he's saying, no, you can make all these things within 50 amas. Except for to the west that you have to keep it 50 amas away. Rather, Rabbi Kiva is saying he can make to every direction, everything you can make 50 amas like the Tanakama had said. He's being machmir, and he's saying to the west you can't make it at all because the wind will bring the smell into the even more than 50 amas. The western wind brings more of a smell. Toshma, I'll bring you raya, the Tanya, Rabbi Kiva Oima, Rabbi Kiva, so we see like the second shot that a person can make these things in every direction as long as he keeps the 50 amas away. Except for to the west that you can't do it at all, because the western wind is tadira. And therefore it's going to be worse, and therefore even further than 50 amas you can't make it. So the Gemara is going to say what tadira is. Amalei Rav Rav Nachman, my tadira. What does it mean tadira? If you mean to say that it's a constant wind. From all the winds, it's the one that always is blowing toward the city, and therefore you could never have it, even if it's 50 more than 50 amos away. That's not true. All the four ruchos, they all blow during the day from all directions. Ruach finest im kula, but the ruach from the north, that is constant. That always goes. Shel malikein ein oilam miskayin, because the north wind is salutary. It's a pleasant wind, and it takes away the harsh effects of the other winds. So that's the way the Rishon made the world, that the north wind is always blowing to take away the harsh effects, to counteract the other winds that are harsher. Because if not for that, not for that, the world will not survive even an hour without the north wind. But you see that we're not saying that the west wind blows all the time. And the ruach from the west is the worst wind.
In south.
I'm sorry?
South.
I'm sorry, you're right. It's south. Correct. Ruach Draimis is Kashmikul. The southern wind is worse than all of them. If not for this malach called the Ben Nates that mitigates the effects of the southern wind, it would destroy the entire world. Shenemar Hamavinoscha Yaver, from your Havana, from your understanding, Yaver Nates will the Nates Yafresh Knofel will tame it. Causes the Nates, this malach called Ben Nates, and he spreads out his wings in the south to stop this bad wind from destroying anything. So you see, but we're not saying that Tadira is on the western wind. If anything, it's on the Tzafinus that blocks the harsh winds. Elamai Tadira. So what does Rabbi Kiva mean when he says that you can't put one of these foul-smelling things even more than 50 amas from the west? Tadira b'shchina. He means to say that the shchina is its resting place is toward the west. You have to have hakaras atoiv to our forefathers, meaning to the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, sheidiu makom tefillah, that they let us know to which direction we should be mispal. The hosts of the Shamayim, we bow down to the hosts of Shamayim, meaning the heavenly bodies, they bow down to you. So, and we understand that to mean that this is a pasuk in Nehemiah. Nehemiah was written, that we had this a couple of days ago. The Sefer of Nehemiah was written by Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, and they're telling you that when the sun and all the heavenly bodies, it happens to be, I just was reading, if anyone has Ray Reisman's book, he has a Pathways of the Prophets. He has a chapter on astronomy with different suggestions, and he starts it off by saying that there's some shittas that hold it's a separate mitzvah deraisa to learn astronomy. Yeah, he says mamash deraisa, it's separate from all the halach, from all the dinei of learning Torah. The person is supposed to know not astronomy, I mean, but how the heavenly bodies work. You have to know it. You have to know it in order to understand the Yom Tovim and the Mazalas. So, in any case, but the pasuk is telling you that all the heavenly bodies, at least the way it appears to us standing on the earth, because of the earth's rotation, they appear to rise in the east and set in the west. That applies. That's the moon and the sun and the stars. So it says that they all go. Since all the heavenly bodies set in the west, it's as if they're bowing to the west where the Shekhinah is. That's how we know to daven toward the west. Now, obviously, we know we don't daven to the west, right? We're going to see later on. This is one shita. There's going to be other shitas. It means this is saying we daven toward the west because that's where the Shekhinah is. It's separate from that which we do, which we're going to see soon, that we daven toward the east to where Yerushalayim is. How do you know that the fact that the sun and the mazalis all set in the west means that the Shekhinah is to the west and they're bowing down by setting in the west? Maybe what it means is that they're all like in Chaim Berlin, they're very makbid that when you leave your Rebbe, you have to back away from him. You don't turn your back to him. So maybe all these mazalas that are setting in the west, they're setting that way, but they're facing toward the east, where the Shekhinah is. So their setting is their backs, so to speak, are toward the west, and their front is toward the east, where the Shekhinah is. Mishtachava. Kasha. So Gemara Taka is a good kasha. Rav says, like we all learned when we were in kindergarten, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is everywhere. The Shekhinah is not toward one specific way, either east or the west. It's everywhere. The Amr Vaishi, Amaydachsev, Atuhu Hashem Levadcha, you Hashem are singular, Atasisa Shemayim, you made the Shemayim, Shluchacha loike Shluchei Basavadam. Your Shlucha are not like Shlucha Basavadam. That when they send out a shliach, the shliach has to come back and give their message. But the shluchas of the shluchim of the Basham, l'makom shtachim misham machzirim shlichusam, to the place that they're sent to. That's where they do their. That means the Beresham sends out his shlichim. He sends out the heavenly bodies, and they do their shlichus when they arrive there. Shnema ishtalech barakim vayelchu. He sends out their messengers, and they go. Vayomer lecha hinenu, and they say, "We're here." Yavayu v'yomer. It doesn't say that they come back and they say it. El vayelchu, they can go v'yomer when they say it over there. That's because since the Shekhinah is in B'chol Makom, the Bereshim can send the Shliach from one place, wherever it goes, it can do the Shliach over there. For Avram Yishmael, Sava Shekhinah B'chol Makom, the Tanra Be'er Yishmael, Minayin Shekhinah B'chol Makom. Where do you see that? Shenemer, Hine HaMalach HaDoiver Bi Yoitza, this Malach that speaks to me goes out. The Malach Acher Yoitza L'Krosa, another Malach goes toward him. Achrav Le'nemer, it doesn't say a Malach goes after him to get the message. El he goes toward the shliach goes, and then my shliach, the Bereshlam Kaviyachol, sends out a shliach for him. That's because, like we said, that the Shekhinah is b'chol makom. Ba'af Rav Sheshes Sava Shekhinah b'chol makom. Rav Sheshes holds the same thing. The Amalei Rav Sheshes l'shmai. Rav Sheshes said to his shamash, l'chol ruchsa ukman. You can. He said, "Send me." Rav Sheshes couldn't see, so he had to have his shamash point him in the right direction. So he said, "You have to point me to Davin. You can put me in any place, except for the east. And it's not because I don't want to daven to the east, because there's no Shekhinah there. Like we said, because Rav Sheshes holds taka that it's in every direction. It's because he held that Apikursim would daven toward the east. They felt that the Shekhinah was only in one direction. He so much opposed this shita that he said that I want you not to do it the way that the people do it to the east. Bavo Amar Shekhinah b'Ma'ariv. Bavo says the Shekhinah is in the west. Amar Bavo, my Urya. What is this word that they it seems like in Persian the word Urya meant to the east? What does it mean? Avir zeh. That means that this is the avir of the east. Is the avir is the air connected the west. So we call the east the avir because since the Shekhinah is toward the west in the Ma'ariv, we call the east Urya. Okay, we're going to stop over here, and we'll continue Be'ez Hashem on Matzah Shabbos.